Wow. The clip that we played in the beginning of this broadcast looks like it was made by Providence 76, highlighting an amazing meme video of the former president of the United States and a satirical comedic video that highlights his absolutely incredible, amazing bullet dodging skills. This as during this key crisis moment in this country, the corporate media is showing their true colors and just how absolutely disgusting they are, as the New York Times is deciding to focus on people who have questions about what's really going on here by launching an article that is talking about how social media platforms are deluged by unsustained claims, as the New York Times found it hard themselves to figure out what was really going on here, as it looks like they did almost everything in their power to obfuscate the larger ramifications, the larger impact of exactly what happened yesterday, as some of them tried to play it off like he was just escorted after a loud noise. According to the Washington Post, NBC News, there was a popping noise. USA Today, there was a loud noise that startled the former president. ABC News, loud noise ring out in crowd. Yeah, that loud noise was someone trying to take the life of the former president of the United States, you imbeciles. George Stephanopoulos is talking about, for some reason, how Trump added and contributed to this with his rhetoric. Something doesn't add up here. Something doesn't make sense. And we have some very serious questions here about what happened, as if I was Donald Trump, I would absolutely not trust the Secret Service from here. I would also get a taste tester. I would also set up a very radical vice president of the United States that would scare the deep state.
All right, so Luke mentioned that the deep state is scared. Let's consider that for a second. What would it look like if the deep state got scared? First off, why would they be scared? Well, they are heavily invested in the Biden property, which is now going underwater. That would cause a little change in panic. Now, if you look at it not just in American terms, but Anglo-American terms, that spells disaster for a nation-state ally, part of the Anglo-American establishment, that has for a long time benefited from their control in U.S. government. Now, you can make the case that Trump's also under control and his uncle was knighted by the Queen and et cetera, et cetera. But on the flip side, they really don't seem to like him. He's kind of like a brash American. He's not very integrated with British culture. So if you look back at this in a historic sense, the deep state comes to power in a big way after World War II. Why? Well, the United States and the United Kingdom participated in funding the Nazis and then bringing Nazis back to both of their respective countries. They ran Operation Gladio, many other coups around the world together with MI6 and CIA. They're all involved with the assassinations of JFK, RFK, MLK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. Sorry, one of those was redundant, probably the MLK. All the way up through Watergate. So now you've got the people who benefited from the death of the assassination of Kennedy. They're in power. That's like Team B. All the people that later worked for W. Bush in 2000, they're in the White House in the 70s under Nixon. Rumsfeld, Cheney, Wolfowitz, all those guys. You go to Iran-Contra, again, it's deep state, black marketing, drug sales to American citizens, all sorts of skullduggery. Followed that up through BCCI, Oklahoma City, 1993 World Trade Center bombing that was done, admittedly, built by a bomb instructed by the FBI. According to Ahmad Salem, they're informed who recorded the conversations with his FBI handler, John Antisev, and that's all on the record. So now you get to 9/11, you start to see more clearly, like there's a history, a multi-generational group of people who are doing state-sponsored terrorism in a way that they blame on their enemies. You see patterns of that. Likewise, you see patterns of assassins. Hinckley, he was, his brother is out with H.W. Bush's brother the night before the assassination. The Global Vision Foundation, or whatever that MK Ultra Foundation that was involved with Hinckley. You've got the Chapman who shot John Lennon. There's a bunch of MK Ultra type, Manchurian candidate type assassinations that went on for a time. You got guys like Ted Kaczynski, who also brings bomb making to the table. He's MIT, Harvard, MK Ultra under, I forget which MK Ultra set. Henry Abramson might have been even the same psychologist that worked with what was it? Frank O'Neill? There was the guy who they threw out the window in 1953. And that was a famous MK Ultra LSD situation. Frank Olson, that's the guy they threw out of there. He used to work in bio warfare for Anglo-American intelligence. And then he was in those MK Ultra experiments. So now those things are parts of real history. MK Ultra was a real thing. Those assassinations are real things. And then you have this situation where they're asking us to try on a situation where it doesn't really add up and there's more to be seen. Many of you might have watched a video online. You might have looked at the comments for that video. Sometimes it changes your perspective. Sometimes it shapes the next outcome or your choice. Now, what if you were to learn that those comments aren't really the comments that are genuinely on that video in the position where they're showing them to you, and that you are seeing a personally curated version of the internet? And if you look up a video and I look up a video, we're going to see different comments based on the internet avatar profile that they have stored on us, right? So it's beyond like dead internet theory. This is more like they've taken away the useful stuff and now they're just using it more of a panopticon surveillance, control system. This past week, Aaron and Melissa Dykes at TruthStream Media, they put out a piece called "Are Algorithms Dividing Everyone?" And I was like, oh, that's first off, good thumbnail, guys. That was a good graphic. And then I clicked into it and I was like, oh, geez, is this going on? Yeah, it's going on. And so it wasn't on my radar because I don't read comments. Traditionally, as a viewer of things, I don't read comments. When I read articles, I'm not reading the comments. I'm looking up the references. I'm clicking all the links. I'm not going to look for value generally in comments. Likewise, as a producer for over 10 years, I didn't have comments on my videos because to me, allowing people to leave comments on the videos lets you think that I'm going to go read those comments or respond, and I don't. I have communities where if people want to ask me questions, that's where they go and they get their questions answered. So I also wasn't participating in that. Now come to find out, there's two different demographics of decision makers. Those of us who consume information, click links, look at evidence, but we don't look at comments. And those who are heavily having their opinion shaped by the comments they see, which is why they're manipulating the comments under the various pieces of content. So in one of the studies that Melissa shows, they go through who makes decisions based on these things. And I just found the whole thing to be fascinating. So it's a little outside of the Grand Theft World news of the week. But if you watch the rest of the stories tonight, you're also going to start to see this is exactly how they can precipitate a civil war or create a deluge of doubts that bring on such conflicts. Right before we go to TruthStream, we're going to go to Caitlin Johnstone, her reader. She has a professional reader that takes her written pieces and narrates them. It's called "Our Propagandized Society is Like a Sick Man Who Doesn't Know He's Sick." So these two pieces, I think, are going to form a good segue, if you will, into the next section, which will, of course, will deal with the Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield ear situation. All right, so let's go to Caitlin Johnstone, and then we'll get to TruthStream and learn about this alternate way of manipulating people that heretofore was off most people's radar.
Our propagandized society is like a sick man who doesn't know he's sick. I write a lot more about the problems our society faces than I do about solutions. I do this because we are so far from being able to implement real solutions that most people don't even really know the problems exist yet. I could spend my time talking about the need for a giant people's revolution to dismantle the U.S. centralized empire, end capitalism, and replace the competition-based systems which are driving us to our doom with collaboration-based systems where all of humanity collaborates with each other and with our ecosystem. But those solutions aren't going to emerge anytime soon because public consent for the status quo order is still being manufactured with a very high degree of success. At this point in history's unfolding, I may as well say we should solve all our problems by inventing free energy and living in the sky like the Jetsons. Right now, our society is like a sick man who A. doesn't know he's sick, B. refuses to believe he's sick, C, believes the medicine is poison. D, has no health insurance and can't afford the medicine anyway. And E, also has no means of transportation to get to the doctor.
We're being programmed based on what we say we're interested in, and we are told through these discovery mechanisms what is interesting, and as we engage and interact with this content, the algorithm continues to build more and more of this bias. But the algorithm, even if it's open source, is effectively a black box. You cannot predict 100% of the time how it's going to work, what it's going to show you.
You're being programmed by the technocrats. I'm sure it's not a bad thing. I'm sure they mean well. I'm sure they're doing it to save the planet. And it has nothing to do with the next block of items we have before we get to the elephant in the room, because the next block has to do with HHS, Health and Human Services. They're supposed to help people in the government, right? Whistleblower exposes child trafficking. And then we also have a Jimmy Dore clip with a different child trafficking, MK Ultra history type of situation. So in the context and framework of technocrats trying to control people and their activities, you also have the history of MK Ultra, programmed assassins, Manchurian candidates, and now you can add to that AI that can send out messages and counterfeit stuff and deep fake stuff and all sorts of stuff to put a patsy in position potentially. Or maybe the guy they say did it and it's as simple as what they're telling us, but there would have to be no contradictions and the stories have to make sense. Can we all agree? Because if that's what happens, that's what happens. But if that's not what happens from the official story, it means the official story doesn't match up to reality. Otherwise, it would match the evidence and make sense and not have contradictions. That's what done right looks like. So before we can get to the elephant in the room, I want to go real quick. We're going to catch part of this story from Clayton at Redacted, and then we're going to go real quick to Jimmy Dore about the MK Ultra sex trafficking, and then we'll be right back to get into the big story.
And Tara joins us now. Thank you for being so brave, and thank you for the amazing work that you are doing. And I cannot believe the silence. It's absolutely deafening. And when I look at my 3 children, I mean, it really makes me sick to my stomach that more people aren't focused on this story. So welcome to the show, and thank you for everything that you're doing.
Well, Clayton, thank you so much for shining a light on what we now know is government-sponsored, taxpayer-funded child trafficking. It's absolutely shameful, and I really appreciate that you have been one of the consistent voices speaking the truth on this issue. Thank you so much.
So this guy, Douglas McGregor, he's a U.S. Army colonel, retired. He wrote a book about the military. Everybody quotes it. He's always in high demand for his commentary. He's a military and TV analyst. And so he tweeted this out. MK Ultra sex trafficking survivor, Dr. Juliet Engel, who was sold to a CIA handler by her father at the age of 6, tells her story. In the early 1950s, Secretary of State John Foster Dulles officially sanctioned an illegal program of mind control and drug experimentation to be conducted on unwitting American citizens. So they did. So this is your government did this. If you can think it, your government did it. So they did this.
Well, hold on, Jimmy. Russia, you have to understand, the Soviet Union, and also in Korea, if you recall, I didn't know this part of the story. So a bunch of U.S. soldiers had been captured. Okay, this is what started the brainwashing craze, mind control fear.
Oh, right,
panic.
and the Manchurian candidate thing.
So what happened was at Korea, we were fighting China and Korea, and some captured U.S. soldiers defected and said, we don't want to come back. Now, I didn't remember this part of the story. The United States has been using bio-warfare on them. So I'd heard the one part, and so, of course, we know America would never do that. So they were clearly brainwashed. And America's like, oh my God, they've mastered mind control clearly.
Oh, really?
Because it's impossible in the 50s, right after we got all the Nazis that make that kind of stuff, that we would then turn it on the commies. So that's when they got the excuse to do this. But then, we've discovered it didn't work and they stopped doing it.
So
these people were the first iPhones.
So they're still doing it. So this is Douglas McGregor tweeting this out. He said, Secretary of State John Foster Dulles sanctioned this to happen. The program MK Ultra, maybe you heard of it, was based on the work of Nazi scientists brought to the United States from Germany, as Kurt just said, under the auspices of Project Paperclip following the Nuremberg trials. The program was headed by Sidney Gottlieb,
Yeah, that guy.
and initiated on the order of the CIA director Allen Dulles on April 13th, 1953. In 1975, the Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with respect to intelligence activities, foreign and military intelligence, was chaired by Senator Frank Church. Maybe you heard of the Church Committee. Initial investigations led to revelations that at least 80 American universities, colleges, hospitals, plus 185 private contractors had engaged in 149 separate CIA-funded sub-projects involving mind control experimentation, including forced administration of mind-altering drugs, particularly LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, sexual abuse, and torture.
Heavy emphasis on those last two.
Unfortunately for the investigation, the CIA director Richard Helms ordered all MK Ultra documents destroyed prior to their being subpoenaed by the Church Committee and the Gerald Ford Commission to investigate CIA activities within the United States, just like they destroyed all the videotapes of the torture program that George Bush ordered. They destroyed all of them. Nobody got in trouble for that. Nobody got in trouble for this.
Oh, by the way, the torture wasn't just waterboarding.
It was way worse. In 1977, a small cache of 20,000 documents was discovered, and Senate hearings resumed. So they didn't get all of them. Subsequent testimonies from victims, researchers, and officials revealed that unsupervised experiments were carried out on an unprecedented scale, involving thousands of victims in the United States and Canada, including children.
Especially children.
Each child victim of government-sanctioned human trafficking has a story. So surviving sex magic, this lady is her story. It begins in Seattle in 1955. Let's listen to a little of this.
Dr. Juliet Engel. I have the honor of leading the new Our Country, Our Children Action Response Team called Protect Our Children. Our members are patriotic Americans from all walks of life who recognize that our children are at risk like never before. Child trafficking and abuse are endemic in our country. Government, from local to federal, is often complicit, and nothing will change for the better until we become the lawful agents of change and do it ourselves. Institutionalized child trafficking is not new in our country. I was trafficked in 1955 at the age of 6 when my father sold me to a CIA handler in the MK Ultra program Sex Magic. I grew up in a cult of mind control, satanic ritual abuse, sexual abuse, and soul-stealing black masses, conducted often in tunnels under Disneyland.
Now, we're going to have one more small section, and then we'll get to the elephant in the room, because this next section kind of builds out a little juxtaposition. Now, we just heard about a little bit of MK Ultra. Let me take you over here to the history blueprint. This is Louis Jolyon West entry in the history blueprint. And as you can see, behavioral psychology, MK Ultra, psyops, psychological manipulation, warfare, working with the Army and the CIA and MI6. It's the Anglo-American establishment. Now, Jolyon West has an interesting history because, he was involved with, Patty Hearst and Sirhan Sirhan and Timothy McVeigh and Jack Ruby and, a whole bunch of different stuff that seems really suspicious. These, lone gunmen, people who didn't conspire. Like we all know at this point, Sirhan Sirhan did not shoot RFK Jr. So that's interesting because I think he might be out of prison now, but he was in prison for a long time. He's a Palestinian, by the way, who did not shoot RFK Jr. I'm sorry, RFK from the back. RFK. Speaking of the 1968 assassination at the LA Ambassador Hotel. So Jolyon West has a very interesting history juxtaposed to MK Ultra. Also, he worked under, Sidney Gottlieb, and MK Ultra is a huge project with a long history, with a lot of sub projects. And Frank Olson plays into this. I mentioned him earlier tonight. So there's a little bit of grammar. You would need to know some individual parts to start to figure out the entirety of what the picture is. But as you see, there's a lot of history that happened before MK Ultra, and a lot of people, including the Nazis, that played into MK Ultra and the CIA's handling of that situation and manufacturing of Manchurian candidate shooters out there. So this next section is titled Jack Ruby's court-assigned shrink was an MK Ultra doctor. So this is a researcher and author who's in talk with he's in a conversation with Joe Rogan discussing the ironies of that, because I think there'll be more irony. And then the last video before we get to the Trump story is from Warrior Poet Society John Lovell, and it's titled Beware the Nice Guy, because I think he makes a lot of good points in there. And I'm pretty sure this video was made just prior to the attempted assassination of former President Trump. So then you'll have that part of the time capsule isolated from all the noise and distortion that comes after shots were fired. So let's go to this block. Then we'll be right back to start analyzing the evidence that exists at this time about the thing that happened with the ear.
Imagine if the whistleblower had not come forward and we didn't know about MK Ultra and all those documents didn't they didn't find the warehouse where the documents were. Right. Just imagine.
Oh yeah, we never would have known about
lost. Like Kaiser say.
Nobody in the program has ever come out and talked about it. I mean, I went to a couple of guys who are still alive, wouldn't talk to me.
Of course.
I mean, they always fall back on, we sign an oath with the agency.
Right.
If we talk to you without permission and they're not going to give us permission, we could go to prison.
Just imagine what life must have been like for them, knowing that this is what they were doing to people.
Oh yeah,
that's such a strange way to. These people are agents for the federal government. I mean, what kind of precedent does this establish?
Well, most of the people doing the research were subcontracted researchers at, medical personnel at prisons. And in the case of Jolly West, he was first in the Air Force, and then he was in university settings. And Jolly was, once he got to the University of Oklahoma, he was experimenting on patients. And in one of his letters to Gottlieb asking for more funding, he's saying working with psychiatric patients actually benefits us because people can't, I'm not quoting directly here, but he was making the argument that their weird behavior wouldn't be noticed by anybody at the hospitals because they're psychiatric patients. So these people are getting LSD, which is a pretty powerful drug, and other drugs he was using, and he was hypnotizing them in many of his experiments without their knowledge, and they're psychiatric patients. I mean, it's worse than Nazis. Your mind is, the next most important thing besides your soul, and they're tampering with it.
Beware the nice guy. Looking back through my life, it's the nice guy that causes so much heartache and difficulty across the board. And so today's episode is going to center on that. I'm going to talk about 5 things that nice guys never do.
That's John Lovell of the Warrior Poet Society. He's a former Army Ranger. He also knows something about protective security details that we're about to get into with this next story. Now, as we segue in, I thought it might be interesting for some of you who are interested that the topic of MK Ultra goes much deeper. And if you don't know about it, I would highly recommend if you are a Grand Theft World member, you have access to the history blueprint. You go over here and you click this, or you could just search it in the box. The Minds of Men. It's a documentary film by TruthStream Media, Aaron and Melissa Dykes, circa 2018. Let me just show you, because as I watched their, I think it's 3.5 hours, masterpiece, I mapped it out in the history blueprint. So all of these topics are covered in that movie, and many, many, many interesting insights await thee should you be so bold as to watch their film. Now, also, if we go back to MK Ultra and we go over here and we scroll down, there's this film. State of Mind, The Psychology of Control, is something that I co-wrote with my good friend Kevin Cole. and it was distributed by Infowars and that guy called Alex Jones, and it was produced by Free Mind Films, and it includes John Rappaport, G. Edward Griffin, Charlotte Iserbeat, but it is a documentary also about MK Ultra and how they use that type of technology. This is more of a meta view, and The Minds of Men by Aaron and Melissa is more of a micro view. They have every last detail on it. We're showing kind of like there's a course of history over thousands of years that they've sought to control people, and here's the various levels of control as they've asserted it, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to make that something that's on your radar. And also, if you're interested in learning how to observe reality, find the individual parts, see how they go together, make decisions, take actions, produce documentary films, get truth out there, getting people to see the fire, as Caitlin Johnstone said earlier, it starts with intellectual self-defense. And again, you are formally invited this coming Sunday, July 21st at 12 p.m. You can register for free, and the universityofreason.com website is universityofreason.com/autonomy-mindset-3. And you don't need to have come to Mindset 1 and 2 to get what's going to happen in Mindset 3. And there's lots of other interesting things that come with that. And again, the admission there is free.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come